people say, well, why are the Chinese so aggressive? Why are they so, why do they, there's no reason for this. They don't need this. No. The Chinese have wonderful reasons for claiming all of this. And it's people, there's been a lot in the media, on the blogs, in the foreign policy blogs, that East Asia is like before World War I. China's the Kaiser's Germany, and new nationalism, new industrialization. It's 1914 Europe. I've been in print debunking this. I don't believe this. The right metaphor, and this is where you get to understand the Chinese logic, is what the Americans did in the Caribbean in the 19th and early 20th century. So what the Americans did in the 19th and early 20th century was they gained strategic control of the Caribbean. And by doing so, they became dominant in the Western Hemisphere. And by dominating a hemisphere, they became a hegemon. And that allowed them to affect the balance of power in the Eastern Hemisphere, the other hemisphere. And that is what the history of the 20th century was all about. America tipping the balance in 2 world wars and in the Cold War. What the Chinese desire now is, the Chinese have said to me, they say, why should we be any different than you Americans in the Caribbean? You Americans were rapacious. You had gained dominance over a continent, and then you sought quite naturally, and it was your right, to gain dominance over the adjacent blue water extension of that continent. That is all what we're trying to do. Because with that blue water extension, the Asian Mediterranean, the South China Sea, China then has entry into the wider Pacific. And if you think of the Strait of Malacca as the Panama Canal, it has entry into the Indian Ocean, into the world's global energy interstate. And China becomes not a one-ocean navy, but a two-ocean navy. And with a one-ocean navy, it's just a great regional power in military terms. With a two-ocean navy, it's a great world power. The world is multipolar diplomatically, economically. But it's not multipolar militarily, because despite the disappointments of Iraq and Afghanistan, the U.S. Navy and Air Force still essentially dominate, much global space in East Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East. China's goal is to do likewise, and the South China Sea is as key to that ambition as the Caribbean was to the American vision. What the Chinese seek is to get the Americans not out. They're very moderate. They want the Americans' presence to be diluted in the South China Sea. They want Americans the American Navy not to have the unimpeded access to the South and East China Sea that it has now. And so it has a program of anti-access area denial, which is a horrible acronym that basically means more and more ballistic missiles, more and more cyber warfare capabilities, more and more the quietest, latest diesel-electric submarines, which are better than nuclear submarines in the close territorial, dirty waters of the South China Sea. All of which will not deny Americans access, but will make American admirals think twice and 3 times before they deploy in a certain area. There'll be more decisions to be made, more calculations, and that is the essence of power, to somehow constrict or seem to constrict the actions of your adversary. So China hopes to eventually dilute American naval presence in the South and East China Sea. And by doing so, it will make an end run around Taiwanese sovereignty without having to fight, because it has 1,500 ballistic missiles already focused on Taiwan, but there are 300 commercial flights a week between Taiwan and mainland China. And China hopes to do all this without ever having to fight. That's the goal, never fight. Because if you fight the Americans in a fleet-on-fleet battle, you lose.